Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will begin momentarily. Please welcome the Atlantic's Margaret Lowe.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Margaret Lowe, and I'm president of AtlanticLIVE, the team that brings the Atlantic's journalism to life on stages across the country. And we are so happy to be here with you in Los Angeles for this Renewal Summit. We've been actually crisscrossing the country with this Renewal series, exploring the surge of local problem solving. We've been to Phoenix, Pittsburgh, Seattle, New Orleans, Houston, New York, and now here we are in LA. So many cities, large and small, are labs of innovation and inspiration. Los Angeles and California are clearly at the forefront of some of the most cutting-edge scientific, technological, and social innovations of our time. And yet, this city also faces enormous challenges, a stunning rise in homelessness, and for those who do have a place to live, people with means pushing people without means out of their neighborhoods. Add to that significant gaps in how rich kids and poor kids get educated, underlying inequality exasperated at every turn. So today we're actually going to ask the question, what will it take to ensure quality of life and greater opportunity for everyone in LA? And I think everybody in this room knows that there are no easy answers to that question, but today we're going to hear from those who each in their own way are working towards solutions. Nonprofit and civic leaders trying to make sure everyone in LA has a home. Policymakers tackling everything from climate change to cultural change in this increasingly diverse city. In a conversation about the gentrification of Latinx neighborhoods, we'll hear from a young actor who tells a uniquely LA story. And we'll hear about one woman's quest for criminal justice reform here in this city and across the country. Before we dive in, I have a very important thank you, and that is to Allstate for making our Renewal series and this gathering possible. We're so grateful for your support. I would love to give Allstate a big round of applause. As we get going, we want you to join the conversation on Twitter at AtlanticLIVE. You should use the hashtag Renewal Series, one word. And I know that many of you will have questions along the day, and we'll have time for that across the morning. And I'm going to give you a very quick download on how that will roll. So if you'll indulge me for a minute, take out your cell phones. This is high-tech question asking. This isn't required, but we hope you'll play along. Once you have your phones out, type the word Slido. That's SLIDO.com. It's up there on their screens, I think. SLIDO.com. Is everybody with me? Good. Everybody? Good. Good. Next type, Renewal Series, one word. On your screen, you're going to notice an option to ask questions, and this is the technology that we'll be using today for Q&A and for live polling. You can, when you ask your questions, you can identify who you are and what you do. We love knowing that. You also don't have to, but we really want to hear all perspectives across the morning, so please don't be shy about sending your questions in. Keep your phones out now, if you would, because we would like to start with our first live poll. So go to the polls section to answer this question. When was the last time you volunteered at a nonprofit organization, for a nonprofit organization in your community? Your answers are going to be revealed on the screen behind me. So the choices are less than 6 months ago, 6 months to 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago. What an awesome crowd. I'm not surprised. You're clearly deeply committed to your communities. Given the focus of this gathering, this is a great and invigorating showing. And it's also good foundational knowledge as we kick off this day. So to do that, let's get rolling. We begin with a performance by poet Markeisha Babers, simply titled Home. Markeisha.
Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Markeisha, and I'm going to be performing a spoken word piece called Home. I want to pick one, a real one. I want to strap it to the top of the car, take it home. I want to pull out a box of decorations that's been in our family for generations. I want to help cook Christmas dinner. I want to leave milk and cookies out on Christmas Eve. I want to believe Santa Claus will bring presents. But see, we ain't got no Christmas tree. There's no room in a 4-door unless you count the red and green car freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. No chimney either. I've grown accustomed to Christmas mission dinners. There's 10 people to a room. So before we go eat, they say take anything precious with you. I grab my little brother in my arms, take my mom by the hand, place my other hand on my older brother's back, tell them one day we will have our home back. But how can I expect them to believe that when I don't? When it's been this way for 7 years, I've cried so many tears I could drown myself in my pillow. And believe me, I've tried to be a normal little girl. Once, I wrote a letter to Santa Claus, but I guess what I wrote was a normal little girl request that said, "Dear Santa, I want to pick one, a real Christmas tree. I want to strap it to the top of the car, take it home. I want to pull out a box of decorations that's been in our family for generations. I want to help cook Christmas dinner. I want to leave milk and cookies out on Christmas Eve. I want to believe. I want to garden. I want to plant seeds and grow things besides stereotypes. I want to celebrate my birthday in my backyard. I want to have a water balloon fight without all the restrictions. I want a friend, not a bunkmate, but a friend. But most of all, I want to be a kid again, only if you can, Santa. Only if you can, but you'll have to give it to me personally because we still ain't got no Christmas tree.
For a conversation on combating the homelessness crisis in LA, please welcome Helen Learn, the co-executive director of LA Mas, Anthony Ruffin, Community Center Director at the LA County Department of Mental Health, and Nicole Wallens, the Executive Director of Urban Voices Project. To lead the conversation, Shirley Lee, staff writer at The Atlantic.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, each one of you. Anthony, I want to start with you.
Okay.
So you've been working for 20 years now to serve the homeless individuals in Los Angeles. So tell us, what is the state of homelessness here in LA?
I believe that the state of homelessness in Los Angeles is at a crisis. I believe we have 63,000 people that are homeless currently in Los Angeles County. Probably about 25,000 to 30,000 of those people are unsheltered. And we have a crisis that we have to tackle somehow, some way. A mortality report was just released not too long ago. We're saying on the streets of Los Angeles that 2 or 3 people are dying a day, so we're in a crisis.
Now, you work as the Community Center Director for the LA County Department of Mental Health. What role does mental health play in this crisis?
I think mental health plays a crucial role in this crisis. We don't know how many of these individuals are severely mentally ill. We don't know how many of these individuals that have a persistent psychosis, but we do know it's a lot. And I think the Department of Mental Health has took the stance that this is our population, and we'll be working with this population from here on out.
How does your department work with this population?
We have outreach teams, our home teams, our AOT teams, our med teams, our camp teams, and a lot of different other teams that are specialists in this type of work. And we're going to roll out into the communities and start focusing in on these individuals and treating these individuals with some respect and some dignity, and making sure that they get the services that they need through all means necessary. We're not going to take no from a client that says, I don't need mental health services, if that client has been sitting on a bus stop for 5 years and not moving, or if that client is psychotic and running in the streets naked, and say that they don't need services. Our job is to engage and to continue to engage until we're able to engage. Mm-hmm. So,
Nicole, I want to turn to you. So you're the executive director of the Urban Voices Project, the choir that we will be seeing in action later today. Tell us, how does the program work?
Our program actually works sort of in a way, ideally in conjunction with the work that Anthony does, and we really use music as a bridge for people to get from the streets to services. Our programs are primarily housed in healthcare facilities, in free health clinics, and our workshops create a space where people who are living in really isolating and stressful conditions can come together, find community, find connection. Community singing has a lot of documented physiological benefits from the release of positive neurochemicals, reducing blood pressure, et cetera, but also really critical psychosocial benefits of creating social cohesion and restoring one's human dignity. And once someone gets there, then the idea is that they'll make other changes and will help serve to connect to other services like mental health and other health services.
What brought you to the program? I know you studied art history and you're really passionate about arts education. How did this come together?
I personally just have a history, sort of a background in the arts and education, and generally, how does that not only enrich but empower and connect us to the human experience? And when the first time I visited Urban Voices Project, it was the first of our neighborhoods, ended up being the first of this program that we now are taking to other areas outside of Skid Row. And I just was struck by how open everyone was. People who came from, I don't know where, they didn't know where I came from, but we were there singing together, shoulder to shoulder, really uplifting repertoire, lyrics, ideas, and in that space, everyone sharing their own stories of what those words meant to them and connected to their experience, and in that, we connect to one another.
Now, you mentioned this choir has, physiological effects, psychosocial effects, positive effects. So how specifically does being a part of a choir help a homeless individual, their mental and physical well-being?
You'd have to ask the choir members, honestly, and they'll be telling their stories as well in the performance later. But, it gives someone a sense of self-efficacy and agency and simply a community and a place to go and structure and accountability and skills. We also work to members who come through our programs have the opportunity to train as a facilitator, to participate as an accompanist, as a musician within the program. So it's very sort of holistic community. And then we really work to be part of this more holistic system as well of engaging the homelessness crisis.
Right now, Helen, I want to turn to you over on the end. Obviously, the homelessness crisis goes hand in hand with affordable housing. So you are the co-executive director of LA Mas, the urban design nonprofit. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you're working how LA Moss is working to address the homelessness crisis. Let's start with what ADUs are.
Accessory dwelling units, also known as granny flats, in-law units, backyard homes, ADUs, has been a housing type that our organization has been trying to leverage to be a source of affordable housing. So we have a program called the Backyard Homes Project, which really is a way to help average homeowners become providers of affordable housing. Through ADUs, the requirement is that any homeowner we help, you're committing to becoming a Section 8 landlord for 5 years. And the incentives are that we are your one-stop shop. We help you design, build, permit, finance, lease, and we make it easy, we make it fun. And we've launched our program this year. We have nearly 200 homeowners who've said, yes, sign me up. I want to build an ADU, I'll pay for it, and I'll house someone who's lower income. And we're still accepting applications. So for people in the crowd who are homeowners in the city of LA, we're still looking for interested homeowners. And in the new year, we'll be expanding this program to unincorporated LA County.
What have been the biggest challenges to this program? Have you faced any reluctance from homeowners or any literal NIMBYism, as in not in my backyard-ism?
Well, what's great is that because of California state law, ADUs are allowed kind of by right, which means that you don't have to go through a long, lengthy process. And if your neighbor doesn't want you to have one, they don't have an ability to say no. So NIMBYism, it really isn't a problem. And we've really created a program to encourage, especially low to moderate income homeowners to participate. And for many of these low to moderate income homeowners who are cash poor, asset rich, the ability to finance an ADU has been hard. So we spent a year working with nonprofit banks, community development financial institutes, to create a financial product to make it feasible, financially feasible to do that. So in partnership with Genesis LA and Self-Help Federal Credit Union, we're testing the first ever mortgage product that allows homeowners to be able to finance and build an ADU and be able to contribute to our housing crisis.
Now, Anthony, you were featured in a 2017 Atlantic documentary called Hollywood 14, The Healthcare Cost of Homelessness. It followed you in your previous role as an outreach specialist, and I'd like to roll a clip to give everyone a sense of your work.
I gravitate to the people that are underserved more because my father left when I was 6 months old, and I always wondered what happened to him.
Hi. Oh, this is my son. I'm glad to see you, man. I've been worried about you so long.
Huh?
I've been worried about you so long.
Yeah, I know.
Especially since my wife died.
I know.
I love you, man. Be safe. Promise? All right. I got backup, boy. I got backup. I got an army behind me, yeah. Be safe, Anthony.
All right. I know there's families out there that haven't seen their loved ones. Somebody needs to love them and take care of them until they find their way back to their families.
Anthony, please tell us the story behind that moment.
Well, that's my biological father. He just passed away like 3 months ago. He became homeless in 1984. And I didn't know him growing up. And I really don't look at this as a homeless crisis. I kind of look at it as a human crisis. And he stayed on Skid Row. And him and his wife stayed on Skid Row, homeless for a very, very long time. And he's the one that got me into this work. I'm doing this work. And when we talk about family and we talk about people living on the streets, it is always my goal to connect people to family if they want to be connected to family. My father had a massive stroke 3 months ago, and I found out that he was in a hospital. And what I didn't know is that I would meet my aunt and my cousins that I've never known ever in the hospital. My aunt, bless her heart, is 78 years old, and she just couldn't deal with it. And I got to be there for him and the side of a family that I never knew, and help my father and my family through this process. And what came out of that was that I am now connected to a family that I never knew. And when people call people homeless or crisis, I just truly believe it's a human crisis, because my father was mentally ill. He didn't have a choice. He didn't have the wherewithal to get a job and pay rent and do all the things that we take advantage of. My stepmother was homeless on Skid Row since 1968, and she passed away a few years ago too. So when I go about doing the work that I do, I'm very mindful of not just that person, but that person's loved ones. And I'm not looking just to house someone. I'm looking to reconnect them to family.
Anthony,
Because, yeah.
sorry, go on.
Because I truly believe that we all come from somewhere. No matter where we end up at, we all come from somewhere.
Thank you so much for sharing. Jumping off your point about this, the way that you look not at this as a homelessness crisis, but as a human crisis. Nicole, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the biggest misconceptions about homeless individuals in Los Angeles.
There are so many. And really, it's that, sorry, I guess I need this mic. It's that that it's a label, but it's not. It's not who the person is. It's a condition. It's a circumstance that one happens to be living in at the moment, and it does not define the person. And everyone has their own story. There are as many stories of how people land in the situation they're in as there are people who are experiencing it. And what our program does is really look to each of those individuals and what do they want to do with their lives, and how can participation in Urban Voices projects in an ensemble, in a space where one can regain one's sense of agency, etc. What does that mean for them? What is their bridge? What is their path? Is it reconnecting with family? We have a story of a choir member who, you'll see our choir wears their black T-shirts with the Urban Voices Project logo, and that was what was said to bring to the performance. And this one choir member showed up in a suit, and Liev, our conductor, said, hey, all you needed was a T-shirt. He said, no, it's okay. I've got the shirt. I'll wear it for the performance. I'm going to be seeing my son at this performance for the first time in 7 years, and he's taking me out to dinner, and I want to look my best.
Absolutely.
And that's just one story. So, there are people who want to reconnect with family, getting housing, getting jobs. I think the point really is that there isn't one size fits all. It's not a specific set of steps that gets you to a certain goal. We don't prescribe that, but rather allowing people to define their own path and supporting their getting to that. And so I guess to go back to your question of the biggest misconception is that we can tell people what they need to do to get out of this situation, or that it's obviously some moral flaw or something, which I think everybody here can agree that's not the case.
Right.
But that again, these are human beings, and it is more than a roof and a meal.
Right. Now, we're just about ready to take audience questions, so please submit them, and we will jump to that in a minute. Helen, I want to end with you. Speaking of these misconceptions, how do they get in the way of the work you do, of the Backyard Homes Project? Have you gotten feedback from landlords and tenants so far?
Well, we're going to be in permitting for 4 homeowners at the end of this year and start construction for our first few. And what we've gotten in terms of feedback have really been from homeowners who are excited to participate. And I would say that the 2 kind of big opportunities are that for many homeowners who are interested in building a backyard home, it's unpredictable exactly how much it'll cost. You can hire an architect, they'll give you a fee, go to the permitting, it's unknown exactly how much it'll be, and you'll find a general contractor and there may be change orders. So that's risky, that's being a developer, and for many homeowners, that's a big deal and a lot of work. So what we have offered is to take that risk from homeowners to say, we will take on the risk, we will build you something for $100,000 all in, we will commit to that price point, and it gives homeowners a certainty of how much they're going to have to spend. They're going to know with certainty how much they're going to get back. If you're renting a 2-bedroom unit, you're going to get over $2,000 per month. So that level of risk, which is something that nonprofit developers, for-profit developers do day in and day out, that's something that is hard for the average homeowner. So being able to figure out that that has been a challenge and to come up with a program that really addresses that needs is something that we're excited to see more homeowners take advantage of. I would say that the second challenge has been, there has been lots of policy changes over the years. I serve on the City Planning Commission and have seen all the various policies in place. And what's exciting about accessory dwelling units is that there has been a state leadership to make it even easier than before. You can build ADUs on multifamily lots. You can build more than one ADU. You can build a junior ADU. So that will take in effect in the new year, and that could radically transform what we do with our property in Los Angeles. LA has over 500,000 single-family lots. We have over 850,000 multifamily lots. So if we can have any small percentage of that have more housing units, and for some of those to be affordable, that can make a tremendous difference.
I want to ask all of you this, actually, so chime in. But how can people in this room help, and what do you say to people who feel powerless in trying to address homelessness in LA? Anthony, would you like to start?
All I could say is just take one individual to help another individual. I think it's 10 million people in LA County, 60,000 homeless people. And I think everybody in this room and everybody in the bigger community of Los Angeles County, if we can just look outside of ourselves and our families and just help one individual, that's all it would take.
Right. Now, there's actually an audience question that I want to pop in here. So an audience member asks, if you could enact one policy change in how Los Angeles addresses homelessness, what would it be? Helen, I know your background is in policy. Let's start with you.
One of the goals that the city has is to allow for supportive housing, bridge housing throughout the city. And one of the challenges is that NIMBYism and the desire from residents not to see that in their backyards has been a barrier. So what would be exciting is to not allow that NIMBYism purely because the housing is for someone who is formerly homeless or it's supportive housing to be able to be built. So it would be great to be able to undo the zoning in the city, which really sides towards those who are more educated, who are higher income, and to be able to distribute housing of all types, affordable, workforce, supportive throughout the city. And I think there'll be an opportunity as the city updates its community plans and its housing elements, so I hope that all of you will be there as champions to promote that and to be progressive in allowing for a redistribution so our single family protection and our NIMBYism isn't going to be driving the future of Los Angeles.
Anthony, we have an audience question for you. If there was one law or regulation that you could change, /overturn, /enact, that would make your work easier or more effective, what would that be?
I think it would be our LPS laws. for people that are gravely disabled on the streets. That's one law that I would definitely change because it's so broad and it's so misunderstood. That's one thing that I would definitely change.
Got it. Well, Nicole, I want to wrap up with you. What can you tell us about the musicians we're going to get to know later today?
Oh, I leave them to tell their own story. They need no introduction. But I do, if you don't mind, I want to go back to the question about what we can do.
Of course.
The thing that gives me such hope in doing this work is seeing all of the community members in Skid Row especially coming together. This is a strong, vibrant, resilient community with so many dimensions. We have musical artists, we have visual artists, we have writers, we have athletes. And my one recommendation would be, what is your passion? Because I guarantee you there is someone living on the streets with that same passion. And if you can connect in that way that you both share, there's no telling what that relationship can do and strengthen, and it's mutual. This is not just how do we help other people, but we gain so much strength and healing and sense of community from that experience and relationship as well.
It's about what we share. Well, thank you all for joining me on stage today, and thank you all for being here.
Now, for a conversation on the greatest challenges facing LA, please welcome Marquise Harris Dawson, council member representing the City of LA's 8th District, and Ana Guerrero, Chief of Staff to Mayor Eric Garcetti. To lead the conversation, please welcome Ron Brownstein, Senior Editor at The Atlantic.
Good morning, everybody. After the last week in Washington, I feel I should start by yielding myself 25 minutes for this conversation. Actually, before I yield to myself, we're going to get you involved because before we hear from Chief of Staff Guerrero and Councilman Harris Dawson, we're going to ask you in the audience what you think are the biggest challenges facing Los Angeles. So please open the Slido on your phones again and let us know, what do you think is the most pressing issue facing Los Angeles? Housing affordability, education, homelessness, transportation, jobs, healthcare, public safety. And we're going to give you a second. All right. Yeah, so we start with this kind of cluster of issues with housing affordability, homelessness, transportation. There was actually, interestingly, right before we got here, there was a large citywide poll conducted by the LA Times and the LA Business Council, and it found that 74% of LA residents described homelessness as a very serious problem, 95% described it as a problem overall. Housing affordability came up next. We just had this very extensive and eloquent panel about homeless, but I do want to ask you both to weigh in. Where are we in LA now? Do you feel as though the problem is being ameliorated, or is it out of control?
Well, good morning. Thank you, Ron, for that question, and good morning to the audience. Again, my name is Ana Guerrero, Chief of Staff to Mayor Garcetti. I think that it is definitely a crisis. I think that the poll showed us what we already know, at least what we know at City Hall. And I think we're doing all the right things. We just need to do a lot more of it, and we need a lot more resources. We're housing more people than we ever have. Last year, we housed 21,000 homeless Angelenos. We're building our supportive housing. We're just not doing enough of it, and we're not doing it fast enough. And we could certainly use more resources from the state, which has done a good job already. The new governor has given us quite a bit of additional resources to build more temporary shelter and more permanent supportive housing. But we also need more help from the federal government.
I think that's right. I agree with Anna on this. The challenge is that Angelenos are great people, and so they will never accept their neighbors living on the streets and living in alleys and living without shelter. And so you can't do the work fast enough. But if you take a scientific approach and you look across cities across the world, there's no one that's doing more than Los Angeles.
Can I ask you can't do the work fast enough? Because I think for a lot of people who live here, when they see encampments emerging,
yes.
on new corners, seemingly, constantly. Why are the numbers growing so much? Why has it reached so high? Is it primarily mental illness? Is it affordability? Is it people relocate? What drives this treadmill where you feel like you can't keep up no matter what you do?
It is affordability, without question. So while we're doing all this building, this county produces 18 new homeless people every day. So by the end of the day today, there will be 18 people who last night had housing and tonight don't. And as long as we don't plug the hole, I think it's going to be very difficult for the city to catch up. And so we're dealing with the homelessness crisis. That means we're dealing with the people that are on the street now. I think we've got to open up a new front and be very aggressive about keeping people who are in housing housed.
You talked about resources, but city and county voters have approved some significant resources. I mean, the Triple H bond, as well as Measure H, the sales tax increase. Are they on track to make a dent?
Yeah, the voters of Los Angeles have been very generous, and I think we're going to build the 10,000 units of supportive housing. We have those outreach workers out there. We have more than 800 new outreach workers out there that are paid by the sales tax that the county is managing. So we're making a dent with that. But again, in order to deal with the problem at the scale that we're dealing with, we're going to have to get creative with the federal government. For example, we need to be talking with the federal government about more vouchers. We need to make sure that once we have all those supportive housing units built, we actually have those vouchers so that formerly homeless Angelenos can live in those units. And we are currently at a place where that is a real risk that we may not even have enough vouchers to make sure that we're being able to provide the housing with supportive services.
How do you balance, my old colleague at the LA Times, Steve Lopez, who I don't think we would call kind of a Rush Limbaugh columnist, he wrote this weekend very powerfully, talking to residents in Hollywood about their ability to live in their own housing, in their apartments, in their houses, and how that has been affected by the density of the problem in those neighborhoods. Here's what he wrote. Others I spoke to wondered if there are too few consequences for using drugs in public, blocking sidewalks, and littering streets. While dealing with this undeniable human crisis, do you feel as though it is possible to do more to maintain the quality of life in neighborhoods that are affected?
Well, I think we can always come up with consequences. California is, and really Los Angeles County, is in the situation where the federal government, under the Bush administration, took over our prison system because we were locking too many people up. And so I think locking people up is not a solution. We have far too many people in prison, and far too much of our public housing is, in fact, housing behind bars. That being said, I do think there can be some creativity around creating situations where people are discouraged from acting out in the public right away. We've got to create spaces where people can be. And then, when you see someone using drugs, and this happens in my district all the time, people will call my office and they'll say, someone's having a psychotic episode, but I don't want to call the police. So who do I call? And that's really what needs to be built in our community, so that people have someone to deal with those types of situations that aren't a guy with a gun.
There are cities, we were in Milwaukee at one point, who have tried to build kind of teams of mental health professionals and law enforcement that deal with people on the streets. And that model has been applied in a number of different cities.
Including here in Los Angeles, and I think they're doing good work out there. Again, we have to keep expanding that.
Right. So in our poll, certainly in the Sunday poll of the county by the LA Times and LA Business Council, what ranked next was this kind of interrelated complex of issues of housing affordability, 60% is a very serious problem, traffic congestion, 58%, and climate change, 41%. The mayor, one of the things that's been most defining about him are his climate goals and his environmental goals for the city. And one of them, in trying to get toward these significant reductions in climate emissions, is reducing the amount of vehicle miles traveled in the city. Is that possible without dealing with the affordability crisis in housing? Because you have people who are moving further away from where they work just to afford someplace to live, which is making it very tough not only for the city, but for the state to meet its goals on climate reduction.
Well, we're trying to do both. A couple years ago, Angelenos passed Measure M, which is going to allow us to finish out 15 new rail lines. And we've also leveraged that in order to build more housing around transit corridors. So as many of you in the room, I see a lot of planners in the room, you're probably aware that when we first came into office, we set a goal of permitting 100,000 new units of housing in Los Angeles by 2020. We actually met that goal 2 years early. And that's largely because of the transit-oriented communities policy that our Planning Commission passed. You just met Ella Lung a minute ago, who's one of our commissioners. So thanks to that policy, we've permitted a great number of units along transit corridors. So our belief is that if we're building more housing that is accessible along those transit corridors, we'll see more and more Angelenos moving there, and thereby, in the long run, reducing emissions.
You know, speaking of housing along transit corridors, obviously the locus of that debate in California has been SB 50, the legislation kind of to promote that, which has stalled. The city council voted 12-0 to oppose that.
Yes.
Explain to me why.
Well, because it takes a hammer to a problem that requires a scalpel. And it doesn't get at what I feel is the real issue. The real issue with transportation in this region is our attachment to and addiction to savage and radical inequality. We create jobs in places that people can't afford to live, and then we create the housing that they can afford far away, thinking that we can put the problems of poverty and middle-class life far away from the most privileged people and where the most privileged people live. Here's the trick. When they come, everybody breathes the CO2s that they put in the air. No one gets to escape that. And so until we address that and we say, where there are jobs, there has to be housing. If you want to use people's labor, you have to accept them as a neighbor. So Beverly Hills, just up the road, not to pick on one of our neighbors, you know, they got a bunch of restaurants with a bunch of waiters and busboys and cooks and janitors and security guards. There's no housing for those people in Beverly Hills. The burden of that housing goes on to another city. Beverly Hills reaps all the benefits from their labor, right? The businesses make profit off their labor. The city makes tax returns off of the profits created by their labor, but they don't accept them as neighbors. We've got to end that in California. That's the only way you can truly address getting people off the roads.
Total number of units in Beverly Hills, I think I saw this recently, over the last decade is what, 3,000 something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but council votes 12-0 to oppose SB 50. Did the mayor accept does he agree with their logic, or does he believe that this legislation should be revived and ultimately passed?
I think we'd be willing to take a look at it. I mean, again, we're doing a lot here in Los Angeles. Not enough. We could be doing more, but we're doing way more than our neighboring cities, as was just pointed out, and we're doing more than any other city up and down the state. So I think the mayor's position is similar to Marquise's, and that is that we need to acknowledge that we're doing a lot here, and we have to find a policy that fits in all the municipalities up and down the state, and that encourages other municipalities to also join our efforts.
So the next rock dropped in this pond, precisely to that point, was the vote this month by the Southern California Association of Governments, which historically has tasked the inland counties, you know, San Bernardino and Riverside, with the responsibility for building the housing for the region. Now they've voted to say that Orange County and Los Angeles County will be asked to build more than 1 million new units over the next decade. What is the practical effect of that? What will happen will anything happen as a result of that vote?
Well, I think we all agree. We have a supply problem in California, particularly in Southern California. So to the extent that we can develop policies that encourage the building of more housing at all levels, the more pressure we take off of the affordability crisis. So we all need to stay focused on that goal. We have 3 years and 2 months. Mayor Garcetti has 3 years and 2 months. We're going to stay on that path, and we're going to encourage our colleagues on the city council, who will be there long after we're gone, to set those policies in motion so they cannot be rolled back.
Do you think will that vote have any practical effect? What will it mean?
You know, I think that vote is effectively a conversation that you have in panels like this.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's a non-starter. It's not practical in any way. I mean, the work that we had to do to build 10,000 units of permanent supportive housing, the idea that you're going to build 1 million is pretty far-fetched. I think, you know, the thing that number doesn't look at is the amount of vacant units we have all over the county. I saw a number yesterday, and I haven't had time to verify it, that there are 2 times the number of vacant units in Los Angeles alone. There double the number of vacant units as homeless people in the city of Los Angeles.
Wow.
Now, I mean, you got to address that as well. I mean, you can't build if in fact you don't have a policy that gets housing to the people that need it.
So, you know, a few months ago, we were in Minnesota for an event, talking to the mayor, and they cut the Gordian knot, right? I mean, 70% of their land was zoned for, of their residential land was zoned for single-family housing. And they said, any place in the whole city that's single-family housing, you can also have multifamily housing. I mean, they just, and we heard her kind of reference that in the previous. Is that kind of single, you know, bright cut possible to imagine in Los Angeles? And would it make sense to say there should be multifamily housing in every neighborhood?
Land use chair.
That seems like the third rail of Los Angeles politics.
Yeah.
I mean, Los Angeles is a city of suburbs, effectively. Suburbs.
Horizontal, not vertical, right? All that.
And so I think while you can do density, density has to make sense for the particular city and for a particular neighborhood. I mean, even my district, I just am one council member of 15. But my district, there are at least 7 different types of neighborhoods in that one district, and you can do different things in different neighborhoods. And I think the creativity of architects and engineers has to be applied across the city to get the density, not a one swipe at everything, because again, we know Los Angeles is very different.
Can I stick with you on that? Because you know, you're involved with this Destination Crenshaw project, which I want you to explain. But where this all gets very complicated is, you know, people want more density, but on the other hand, they're very concerned about gentrification or displacement or moving people out of neighborhoods. And I think that was part of the concern of the city council when they opposed SB 50. You thought it would lead to that. So talk about something like Destination Crenshaw. Does that, in the same way that people worried about art galleries in East LA, do you worry that you are inviting displacement, or is this designed in a way to discourage it?
Destination Crenshaw is designed to confront displacement, to essentially assert on the public highway that Los Angeles has an African-American community. We think that that's an important element to have as a part of our city and a part of our community. And we're going to take steps to memorialize and preserve it and push it into the future. Essentially, Destination Crenshaw is an outdoor people's museum along Crenshaw Boulevard, which is the main thoroughfare. It is the largest African-American community in any city west of Chicago, Illinois. It's the last, I say that 3 times, the last sort of solidly African-American community in any big city on the West Coast. And so Los Angeles has offered a lot, the black community has offered a lot. We want to memorialize that on the boulevard so that when you take the line from LAX and you go down Crenshaw Boulevard, when you hit Crenshaw, you'll know that you're in the African-American community the same way when you get off at 125th Street in Harlem, you know that you're in the black community of New York City. And so we'll do that project. Also, black art is in a renaissance right now. So whether it's Mark Bradford or Kerry James Marshall or Kendrick Lamar or Issa Rae, it's in a renaissance. And these people are all our neighbors. And so we say, instead of our neighbors having to go to far away to see the work that their neighbors have done, they ought to be able to see it out on the street in their own neighborhood, telling our own story.
What's the time frame for the project?
We expect to complete Destination Crenshaw when the train rolls, which we're expecting now is at the end of next year.
Wow. I'm going to bring in the audience for questions in a minute, but can I ask you both one thing? You know, the Renewal Project is about communities coming together to deal with their problems from the bottom up. And in many cases, problems that are action on them is stalemated at the national level. Each of you come out of a background in community organizing and community groups, and now you're on the other side of the fence inside of government. And I'm interested in your perspective from each side of that about how well community groups work with government, how well government works with community groups, and where those relationships could be improved going forward. Is there more that community groups could do? Could government rely more on community groups to achieve some of the ends that they pursue?
Well, I think speaking for our office, the mayor's office, and I'm sure yours is the same, I think we have a practice of reaching out to community groups on some of our most pressing challenges. When we had to last year update Special Order 40, which is the LAPD policy that limits the ability of police officers to inquire with about someone's immigration status, for example. We reached out to immigrant rights advocates, to civil rights attorneys, community organizers, to bring them into the conversation about to work with not just with our office, but also with LAPD officials to update that policy. So whether we come from community organizing backgrounds or not at City Hall, I think there are many of us there who realize that we will create more better policy if we are interacting with those that have lived experience.
What was your community organizing background, real quick? What did you do?
Sure. For almost 10 years, I worked for the Industrial Areas Foundation, which was the community organizing network started by Saul Alinsky, which no one ever heard of until Barack Obama. That's actually how I met my boss.
No, that's not true.
I take that back.
Yes.
Not you. So I actually had no plans to work for government. My identity was entirely wrapped up in being a community organizer. But a young professor named Eric Garcetti got elected to the city council and recruited me. And it's been a really incredible experience to be able to, what Eric Garcetti believes, is that government has a responsibility to create opportunity and to make sure that prosperity is distributed as fairly as possible.
Tell us a little bit about your community organizing background and how it's affected your work as inside government.
So Karen Bass hired me as a youth organizer, and I worked my way through that organization. Yes, Karen Bass. And I worked at Community Coalition and took over the organization. When she left, I became the director and did that for 10 years. And you know, it's interesting to be on both sides of the issue. One of the things that happens when you're a community organizer and you do a good job, the community starts to look at you like, okay, you know, I'm cool going with you to City Hall to complain about this or complain about that, but you know, maybe you should get on the other side of the rope. And so you get pushed there and you get pushed to do the work. I think there are lots of things that we've learned in the short time, but the main thing that we try to do in our office is create space for community organizing to be involved, because the nature of government, it moves on a different calendar than the community moves. And so adjusting our systems in a way that we can actually get real input and do some education, because lots of times folks are asked to comment on things that they have no expertise or training on, right? And so creating the time and space for folks to get the full breadth of the experience and apply the best thing we have, which is that they're there every day dealing with the conditions, apply that to our policymaking process.
If I could add one more thing that I think that community organizing does that government isn't necessarily set up to do, although it can.
That's right.
And that is the true power of community organizing is that through the experience of organizing and building collective power is that individuals find their personal power. And if you've gone through life assuming that you have no power, to suddenly discover that you are a peer with a police officer or a police chief or a council member, that's the transformation that we truly need in order to change that individual, change that family, change that community. So the more work that we can do in government to create those experiences, which requires us being humble, it requires us sort of taking a step back. And we do it in many ways in the mayor's office. We have a mayor's youth council. We have a civic university with the Pat Brown Institute. We have a couple of youth councils working on climate change, working on gun violence. So the more that we can do to make sure that we're creating those experiences where people find their own power, that's where true transformation happens.
Let's bring in the audience. Do we have a question from the audience? Yes, sir. I don't know if there's a microphone or not. Is there a microphone? Go ahead. Well, all right, go ahead. Yep.
I'm a professor, so I can project my own. Officially, I'm a faculty member from the Cal State Northridge.
There you go.
Unofficially.
We need it for the live stream. Go ahead.
Thank you. Unofficially, I'm working as a senior advisor to the organization called Plus You. We're organizing SoCal Innovation Forum annually. My question for all of you on the stage and everybody in the audience, my question is, we're talking about housing affordability. We're talking about the homeless. We're talking about jobs. I think there's a common thread among those three issues, at least, which is about the high-quality jobs in LA. If we can create more high-quality jobs, which I hope so, we'll create more jobs for homeless people. Hopefully that's part of the equation. Yeah. I know it's more complicated than that.
We got to go to a question. Go ahead.
Yes, the question. I'm wondering what's the mayor's position on how to promote high-tech, innovative industries here in LA.
Sure. Well, we agree that we need to make sure that our local homegrown community is benefiting from the tech boom that we're seeing here in Los Angeles. We have several initiatives through the mayor's office to promote that, and we also are taking a look at our workforce investment board dollars to see how we can better invest those in job training at our local colleges to make sure that our young people are prepared for those jobs. We also just launched a jobs cabinet that is taking a look at jobs of the future. We're partnering with the governor's office on that. So we're really at a stage where we're looking at and we're trying to include the climate change discussion into that so that we can make sure that our working class communities, our less advantaged communities are able to have access to the kinds of jobs that will exist here in Los Angeles, not just now, but into the future.
I know we have to see the stage, but can I actually put it in this perspective? You've been working in your community for a long time as a community organizer, as a youth organizer now. Do you see people who you work with 15, 20 years ago, gone through the public schools, gone to college, and are now benefiting from the growth in the high tech here, or is it largely passing over the community that you work with?
No, I think again, it's uneven. It's not as even as it should be, but lots of people are being able to access the robust growth of the economy in lots of sectors, and tech included. But the thing I would say to your question is, we have to take the position that every job ought to be a quality job that pays a living wage. This business that you have to get a special job in order to make a living and have a life in Southern California, that's an untenable, unreasonable. We still need people to clean up behind us when we go to meetings like this. We still need people to sweep streets. We still need people to take care of us when we're sick. And those people are entitled to be our neighbors just like anybody else because they do important work. One of the most disturbing stats out of our last homeless count, 2/3 of the new homeless people, so the people that have been homeless a year or less, 2/3 of them had full-time jobs when they became homeless, and they were still working full-time jobs. That's an untenable situation to have.
Important final thought. Council member, Chief Staff, join me in thanking them. Terrific. Thank you both.
Thing's frozen. I'm just going to do it.
Send them out.
Next, for a session produced by our underwriter, please welcome Don Sivkin, President of Allstate Service Businesses, here with KCAL 9 CBS Los Angeles, Susie Suh.
Hello, how's everyone doing today? Oh, beautiful, I love that answer. Yes, that's what I want to hear. Did you enjoy the rain, the quick little rain that we had yesterday? We here in Southern California, we do it efficiently, don't we? We get rain, hail, snow, one day, bam, we're done, on to the next season, okay? We're good. Sitting in traffic yesterday, in the rain, right? I was thinking, we have so many jokes about Southern California's traffic. It's like literally, we laugh about it because I think that's the way we cope with it, right? Because it's such a big problem. We sit there in the rain and we're like, no one's gonna know how to drive today. And on top of that, you're gonna add traffic, and then you know what happens. You get nowhere really quick, right? Well, as I was sitting there, I was like, man, is there anyone brave enough to talk about this? Yes, that's why we're here today. We're literally gonna talk about this and talk about solutions today, which gets me so excited about it. You heard his name already, Don Sivkin with Allstate. And he is here today to talk about our personal ecosystems within our own transportation systems, right? So we're in our car every day, Don, and for hours and hours and hours upon end, right? I mean, we have a really unique situation, though, here on the West Coast. Yep. Talk about that for a minute.
Well, so first, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this problem. I was at a renewal event a few months ago, and somebody came up to me afterwards and said, this is really great that you're part of it, but why exactly is Allstate here? They said, your competition is using geckos and camels to advertise auto insurance, and you're talking about this stuff. And I think from our perspective, it really depends on how you define your role in society. And if you look at our shared vision, Allstate doesn't say auto insurance or homeowners insurance. In fact, doesn't say insurance. Our shared vision is that we will help protect people's lives and help prepare them for the future. So when you think about that in the context of some of these issues, you have to hold yourself to a different standard about what you're trying to do.
Sure.
So, you know, if you think about Allstate being an insurance company, I think what a lot of people don't know is that we are also investing heavily in a variety of other things like telematics, car sharing, digital safety, so that people can protect what they have as far as their online presence and so forth. And the reason we're doing all this, and I think the reason this is a really big issue we have to deal with, is the transportation system in this country is broken. And it's broken even more so here in Los Angeles and other large cities that are congested than it is elsewhere. But the system just does not work.
I mean, we have so many different things in place right now, Don. Construction projects going on.
Yeah.
We're talking about 28 by 28, right? Metro has extension projects for the metro. They have all the rail line as well as widening projects for freeways. We need something now.
Well, we need something now, and we need something that's going to solve the problem in a cohesive way. The average person, the average household's second largest investment is their car. The average car in the United States sits idle 95% of the time. So the cars are being used 5% of the time. When you start thinking about the costs that are associated with that, you can talk about dollars. I think the average Los Angeles resident is spending an extra $2,800 on transportation every year because of congestion.
I mean, are we talking about gas? We're talking about maintenance?
Gas, it's maintenance, over 100 hours a year because of congestion sitting in your car. And the statistic that I think people sometimes miss is 40,000 people a year are dying in car accidents. And I looked it up in Los Angeles, it's over 240 people last year died in car accidents. And honestly, 3 years ago, one of those was the son of a really good friend of mine. And if you take that number nationally, it's 40,000. If you take that number internationally, it's 1.25 million people die every year. And so when you think about the congestion, you think about the cost, you think about the human toll of all this, it's a system that just doesn't work well. And this is in an environment where the average household doesn't have $400 to meet an emergency. Right? And so in that context, you look at what we're doing with transportation, it just doesn't work. And so the reason I think the opportunities in front of us is when you think about data, you think about computing power, and you think about customers' expectations on how things should work, it's all kind of coming to a head and giving us some options on how to start chipping away at this issue that we've got. In particular in a place like Los Angeles. And so we're really excited about it. I think it's a problem that needs to be solved. It's the right thing for society. It's a right thing for our customers. And that's why we're involved in it. And that's why we're trying to make sure that venues like this are really kind of passionately understanding what the opportunity is. It's huge.
I mean, how do you begin, though? That's our big question in this audience, right? How do we even begin to even ask for a solution, begin to think of a solution? You know, I really like the Renewal Summit because it implies that we're rethinking things. We have these issues, and we've known about them, especially here in Los Angeles, for however many years, many years. But we're rethinking this.
Yeah.
What are we thinking with Allstate? How do we begin to do this?
Yeah, so when we think about how to solve it, let's just talk for a second about how it started.
Sure.
Okay, nobody said, hey, let's design a really crappy transportation system that costs a lot of money and kills a lot of people. Nobody said that. What happened was it was built upon layer after layer after layer. You've got many different municipalities. You've got the federal government, the state government. You've got rail. You've got buses. You've got parking garages. You've got road taxes. There's a lot of people who have contributed to this transportation system, which then gets stressed by the congestion that we have, right? The number of people that are using it. So there is, I hate to say it, I wish there was, but there is no magic solution that says, well, if you just do this one thing, it'll go away. It won't. But what we can do is try to get the right people together and start thinking about how the system needs to change. This is a system-wide problem. It wasn't caused by one person. It won't be solved by one person. So I think the trick is to get the system together and the constituents so that we can begin to understand what the problem is and start putting the different pieces together. One example of this is, Allstate, we're an insurance company, but we started a car sharing platform. And our concept was that one way to get the efficiency of transportation up for individuals and society is that people should be using cars more than 5% of the time. And if you look at the options to do car sharing now, they weren't really particularly well developed. And so we said, you know what, we might be a little bit early. The world may not be ready for it. But we thought this is the right thing for us to do to start chipping away at this problem. And we're already in a number of different states, a number of different airports. It's still in a test phase, but I think people have to be willing to invest in these sorts of things to be able to make a difference.
Yeah. And we're using technology, Allstate is using technology to gather data to do this as well, to back up what we're trying to do with actual numbers.
Yeah, the technology side of it's interesting. So, data is everywhere now. Sensors are everywhere. And that's good and that's bad, right? It raises privacy issues. California's kind of taken the lead and saying, okay, we're going to start doing something about that, which I'm glad. But our experience has been that if you use the data in the right way, you can actually begin to solve some of the problems. I'll give you a few examples. So car sharing really, really needs strong telematics capabilities to be able to work effectively. What I mean by that is the odds that you're going to put your car in a program where a neighbor borrows it, but you don't know where it is or how it's being used, is like very low. The trust factor has to be established. Telematics can help do that.
Can you tell us just a quick little breakdown of telematics for those who don't know?
Okay, so telematics, the best way to think about it is that knowing, the way insurance always worked is we would look and say, what kind of driving record do you have? What kind of car do you have? Where do you say you garage your car? Whether you actually garage it there or not, we don't know. And so a number of years ago, we said, it might actually be helpful to know where, when, and importantly, how you drive your car as an understanding of more granular levels of risk. And so we started doing that work, started analyzing that data, and what we found is, to nobody's surprise, those are really, really important elements. So telematics is the ingestion of data. It could be from the car, it could be from a mobile device, it can be from a variety of different sources. We don't really care where you get it from. But it's the ingestion of data and the analytics of that to understand what's going on. Now that can be used for insurance. That's the way we originally started with our investment in it. But if you're going to do any sort of master planning on traffic, you need to know where all the cars are and what they're doing and how they're being used and and so telematics is critical for that. I would also make the point that telematics can be used to actually improve people's lives. So if you open up your phone and you look at your app, on any one of your apps, you're likely to be able to find the fastest way to get from here to the airport. You may get an alternative that says, would you like the shortest way to get from here to the airport? With enough data and enough analytics, we can tell you the safest way to get to the airport. That is an option that actually will improve people's lives, improve safety, and actually lower your insurance costs anyway. But I think being able to use the data in ways that add value to people is really important. That's what we're doing with telematics.
How do you know which is the safest route?
Well, if you're as old an insurance company as we are, and we have tens of millions of customers, obviously, and we have analyzed 200 billion miles of driving data in the United States. And with that data, obviously, we not only know what causes accidents, but we also know the implications of those accidents, because as an insurance company, we have a lot of claims data as well. And so what you do is you apply a lot of very smart analytics people to some data sets that basically will say, if you do this, here's the likely outcome. And it's not just if you do this, it's if you do this on this road segment, in this sort of weather, with this sort of congestion, at this time of day. And so I think the richness of that data just simply gives you good predictive capabilities to understand what creates problems.
Yeah. And this kind of goes hand in hand, Don, with investing in not just, I mean, we already talked about infrastructure, the existing infrastructure here, but investing in smart infrastructure.
Absolutely. I mean, data and sensors, I think there's two sides to it. One is if we're going to use data, you have to be really respectful with it. You have to treat it with, you have to be kind to the people who are giving it to you. You have to give them something valuable in return. You have to be really transparent about why you're taking it and what you're doing with it and so forth. But at the same time, all of these problems are just, it's going to be much harder to solve them if we don't use the advantage of that data. And so, it's a tricky situation. I mean, the more people know their data is being used in certain ways, it makes them uncomfortable. But if you use it the right way, then we can begin to understand why that bus should not be going that direction, and not only reduce the congestion, but help them make safer decisions. UPS has been known for years for telling their drivers not to make left-hand turns, and just make a few right-hand turns because it's safer. That's been true for a long time. That's very basic stuff, but I think there's a lot more richness that we can get out of it. So.
Don, I mean, what do you think for us here in Los Angeles? We addressed this at the top of our discussion here, but more along the lines of, we are unique here in LA. We have these different gathering data points, across the country, but here in Los Angeles, what do you think it is, not specifically, but uniquely, do we need to do here to kind of sort of move us in that right direction? We have all the projects going. Yes, we're working on it, but what do we need now?
Well, first, I have a soft spot for California. I spent, I'm from Chicago. I spent a lot of my early career working out on the West Coast. I have a couple of kids who live in California, and so we try to get out here a lot. I suspect one day, hopefully, I will be spending all of my time out here. But I think the unique problem that Los Angeles has to deal with is just the scale. I mean, it's all the things we're talking about are problems everywhere, and they're kind of inherent to the fact that transportation systems work the way they do. But the stress really gets created when you apply a lot of volume to it. And so I think what we have to do here is really take the lead. I mean, California has taken the lead in so many different areas, and taken the lead in data privacy and so forth. I think we've got to take the lead here and say, look, this can be solved. The risks can be mitigated, the costs can be mitigated, but it takes everybody coming together because, as I said, if you don't have the right people in the room, you can't solve the problem. There was something in Chicago where they were talking about taking a lane, a street in the city, and turning it into pedestrian and bike lane only. And so a group of people got together, a small group of people, and said, do you think this is a good idea? Everyone raised their hand and said, yeah, this is great. Except that when the parking garage owner found out about it, he said, well, this is a really bad idea because this is how I make my living, and I've paid for a parking garage, and if there's no cars, my business just went away. So it really is a multifaceted problem that if we come together, I think we can make a dent in.
Let's talk about coming together. You were talking about the rideshare program, for example. Coming together with different organizations, Allstate, that's what they're doing across different cities across the country, here in Los Angeles as well. What do you say we do with that organization, though? I mean, how do we begin to, hey, let's move forward with this, with our solution right here? I mean, how do we come together to do that, though?
Yeah, first, I don't think we have a neat solution that works in every case. I think it's more about exploring what the problems are, the unique issues in different locations, and then just getting people to engage. I mean, it's really hard to deny that it just doesn't work well. And yet everybody has their own slice of it that they are protective of, and they don't want this to change and so forth. And I think that kind of lack of a unified view is what creates part of the problem. So we've got to sit down and talk about the problems.
And I think what really is interesting is Allstate is sharing this information, the data collected, the telematics. We're sharing it so that we can help others.
I think so. And like I said, it depends on how you define your role in society. If you think your job is to sell as many insurance policies as possible, you'll do one set of activities. If you view your job as trying to make the world a better place, and be part of that ecosystem and part of that solution, you'll do different things. Now, we do sell a lot of insurance policies, and we protect, to the best of our capabilities, tens of millions of people. But I think with that sort of size and scale comes an obligation to kind of give back and figure out how to make the future better. That's what we're trying to do.
Don Sivkin, ladies and gentlemen from Allstate, thank you so much, Don, for being here today. And thank you, audience members, for your undivided attention. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your summit and a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
For a conversation on educating the next generation, please welcome Austin Buettner, Superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District. Moctezuma Esparza, the CEO of Maya Cinemas and founder of the Los Angeles Academy of Arts and Enterprise Charter School. To lead the conversation, please welcome back Ron Brownstein.
So, welcome. When we finished our last panel, I asked the chief of staff and the council member, each of them had been in community organizing and are now in government. And I asked them how it looked, what looked different from the inside than the outside. Mr. Buettner, you've done a lot of things in your life in the public sector, in the private sector, in the ink stain wretch sector of newspapers, but you had not been an educator. What do you think, now looking at the system from the inside, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions people have about it, viewing it from the outside?
We got a couple days for this?
Yeah.
I'd say the biggest challenge we have inside versus outside is reminding people that everyone in the community has a stake in public education. Maybe my windshield survey, Moctezuma's, might be different in that my journey has been built on public education. So I came to this role understanding the importance of it. And I'd say the greatest learning connecting to a community like or this audience is we all have a stake in public education. And I'm not so sure the community of Los Angeles would hold that high enough in their set of values.
Mr. Esparza, you've had a very successful career in the film industry, but then you created a charter school. What has surprised you most being involved at that intimate level in what it takes to produce quality outcomes in education?
I'm shocked that the focus is not on students. The focus is on everything but students. So all of the institutions, all of the stakeholders carve out their turf in reference to their interest, not the student interest as the first priority. That's what's shocking to me.
Yeah. And when you say all the stakeholders, who are you talking about?
I'm talking about the unions, the administrators, the elected officials.
Yeah. What would a system that prioritized student interest more, what would be the biggest difference between that and what we see now?
Well, it would be a commitment to the students in reference to time, right? Children have vanishing time, right? You either educate them while you have them, because if you don't in those 6, 12 years that you have them, their lives are altered forever. And people don't appreciate that time is precious for a child.
Yeah. So when you, Mr. Buettner, so 640,000 students, is that right?
Yeah.
Roughly.
Roughly.
80% qualify for free or reduced price lunch. It has to be one of the highest shares in the country. When you look at those, the challenges, the challenges of economic segregation and racial segregation that are significant in the LA public schools and are in other major cities, what seems to you, now that you have some time there, what seems to you the most important things to do to overcome that level of economic and racial segregation?
Sure. Let me just touch on two things, perhaps. The first is we inherit a system that was designed where the center was in charge. 700 square miles serving the needs of a population of about 5 million people. One size fits all, which it doesn't. So we're doing everything we can to restore the school as the center of our work. That's where decisions are best made, and to connect the community to that school. That we think will accelerate progress for all of our students because the needs in Boyle Heights are very different than the needs in Chatsworth. So allow our educators in schools to have greater voice, allow our families to have greater voice in how schools are run and what happens in schools. The second, it ties back to the comment I made earlier, which is public education is being starved of resource. So we're here in Los Angeles. We have about $17,000 a year to invest in each student. If we were having the same conversation in New York, it'd be $29,000. Now, $29,000 and $17,000 are just numbers on a page, but let me put that in human context. Over the course of a K-12 journey for one student, that means we could provide for each student in second grade their own reading teacher and their own teaching assistant. So we would no longer have the conversation about whether every student graduates proficient, prepared for college, career, and life, if we could do that. So some of the symptoms we see are fundamentally a symptom of inadequacy, and how California could have gone in a generation from fully funded on par with New York or Boston or DC, wherever we want to choose, to being so dramatically different. And those symptoms we see in everything we try to do in school.
I want to come back to the financing in one moment. We'll talk about it at length. But I just want to kind of clarify this point. You said in an interview in 2018, you thought it was more important to try to improve the quality of instruction in a school than to look for policies that would change the racial and economic makeup of the schools. Is that still your view? Or do you think you need to do more to break down some of the economic and racial segregation that is apparent in the schools?
So we're segregated as a society. We serve 85+% kids living in poverty, 85% plus kids of color. We are segregated. We're segregated from the rest of Los Angeles. So our challenge is actually to address the needs of our students. I just came from a school this morning, back to the issue of adequacy, about 1,200 students, 90 plus are receiving some form of counseling. 20 have had some form of suicidal ideation where the clinical intervention was needed. Yet within our scope of resources, we can't address all of those needs. So if we're serving a community or a population with high needs, we have to look that square on, and that manifests itself in all kinds of things, but to define it solely by race, when we're not dealing with the issues of counseling and support that's needed in schools, we're trying to address the issue of over-identification of students for arrest or diversion instead. We're trying to make sure that we have educators who are culturally compatible with the community they serve, want to be in schools, serving high-need schools. We have a host of things we're doing, but if we're ultimately, our population are kids of color, we have to better serve them.
Your charter, the LA Academy of Arts and Enterprise Charter, tell me a little bit about who you serve and what you do that's different than a traditional public school.
We have about 300 students. We're in downtown. Most of our students are undocumented or come from families that are immigrant families. 98% qualify for reduced or free lunch. About 90% were English learners at one point or still are. And every day we have an incident where a child needs counseling, some sort of intervention every day, or have had some event in their family, in their home, that causes a crisis for them. So we have 4 counselors full-time for those 300 students. And so we have reorganized our budget, and we only get about $10,000, $11,000 per child. We don't get the 17, in order to focus on that. And as a consequence, our students take much longer to graduate because they come here not speaking English. Many of them come here to our school not speaking Spanish, speaking an indigenous language from Central America. And so when you look at our graduation rate, some of the students take up to another year or two, and then our graduation rate is 83%, right? So we're looking at what can we do to encourage these students and give them what they need where they are.
The future of charter schools, Mr. Bruno, like Mr. Sparges, the future of charter schools is obviously a central issue or not maybe not a central issue, but it's an issue in the teacher strike. The school board voted earlier this year to support a moratorium, at least temporarily, on charter schools. LA has one of the biggest shares of its students in the country in charter schools compared to other school districts. What is, in your mind, what is the future role of charter schools in educating the kids in LA? Do you expect the share of students to go up? Do you want it to go up? Should it go down? Do you want it to go down? Or is it Goldilocks just right at this point?
If it were just right, I think we probably wouldn't be having this conversation in everything we do in public education. But maybe we're having the wrong conversation about the governance model, because if we went to a school, whether it's Moctezuma School or another school, we'd be looking for great instruction happening in the classroom. We'd be looking for the whole child to be supported, their social and emotional needs, be looking for a strong connection to the family and the community we serve. And I think we'd all agree that's the recipe. That's a recipe for success, irrespective of the governance model. So I think for too long we've had the conversation in Los Angeles about the governance model and not about are the components that we want to see of what a quality education looks like happening in each of our schools, whether it's a traditional school or a charter school. And as we become more transparent, we just announced this week, we're sharing more information about what's happening in each of our schools as a way for our educators to understand how do we intervene, how do we do things differently to try to make progress. But if we spend another decade talking about charter or no charter, I think we're missing the bigger picture, which is every school, irrespective of its governance model, has to provide for great teaching in the classroom, strong school leadership connected to the families and student it serves with all the social and emotional support they need.
But the charter, go ahead.
No, I was about to say that why I was moved to be part of a committee that would create a charter was because from my childhood, I grew up in Los Angeles. I went to LAUSD schools. And 50 years ago, I was indicted by the Los Angeles grand jury for having been one of the organizers of East LA walkouts. I'm one of the East LA 13. And we saw then that the school district and the police department and the city fathers and mothers really did not care about whether or not Latino kids on the East Side were going to get an education. And so we created a social movement. And that resulted in me getting indicted a second time. All right, I was one of the Biltmore Six. I'm one of the only few people, right, who has been indicted by the grand jury twice, secret grand jury indictments, who has managed to survive, right? Because most of my other fellow organizers back then, their lives were destroyed. And mine almost got destroyed. So, but as I exited that and I created a career and I became a well-respected Hollywood movie producer, I continued to be involved in schools and to see what was going on. And about 15 years ago, I went to Wilson High School to go give a talk, and I spent a day there. And I discovered that the social attitudes and views about Latino kids had not changed at that point in 35 years. And my sense is that it's just barely beginning to change, right? What people don't talk about is that Latinos are more than 50%. What is it, 70% of the LAUSD?
A little north of that.
Yeah, a little north of 70%, and that's not taking into consideration the dropout rate. Because if the kids didn't drop out, we'd probably be closer to 80%, right? And we're nowhere near that in reference to teachers, administrators, elected officials. The people in this room do not represent Los Angeles in terms of what the population is.
So in your view, do you think, are charters necessary to, in essence, create more local control? I mean, they obviously a big point of debate. They have become a point of debate even at the presidential level. We have some of the Democrats who had earlier supported them now saying they should be rolled back. Do you think there needs to be more charters? Is the union right? Do we need fewer charters? What would you say?
I'm not for charters or against public education. Charter schools are public schools. They're financed by the taxpayers. I'm for students. I want whatever it is that's going to work to educate students. And charters are playing a role right now by creating a conversation that is uncomfortable and that is focusing on that there are other ways that we can have results that are serving students. So if charters disappear from my point of view 20 years from now, because we have an extraordinary school system that serves students, I will not mourn it.
Mr. Buchanan,
I'm not for charters, I'm for students.
Mr. Buchanan, you talked about the need for financing. Talked about the need for more money. Measure EE last year, $500 million a year. Voters rejected it. Only got to about 45%, I think. Are you going to try again?
We have to. We have to. I think it's an imperative because if we cannot connect the community back to the schools which serve the community, our future elected officials, our future teachers, our future journalists are all going to come from public education in Los Angeles. And we either choose to invest in children and their future or not. So I think we have to.
So what's an alternative? Is there a plan of what to do and when?
So I think stay tuned. My guess is in this coming year there'll be something on the ballot in California. Legislative leaders don't tend to take to voters increases in funding for things. It goes to the ballot. And I'd be surprised if there is not something on the ballot in 2020 to increase funding for public education.
So what are your options? March is the primary.
March primary, November general election. My guess is it'll be November.
It'll be November.
There have been discussions already about different types of initiatives. The question is always who pays and why should they pay? Measure EE to me was crystal clear. We chose to skew it towards those with more property. So as opposed to a parcel tax where a family in 1,100 square foot home or residence in South Los Angeles would pay the same as a building owner downtown, we didn't think that was fair. So we skewed towards per foot. Those with more feet pay more, those with less feet pay less. Unfortunately, those with more feet decided to protect their investment and campaign against it.
It was interesting because, often in many cities, as you know, the business community will be generally supportive of more spending on education, arguing that this is our pipeline to our future workforce. Did not happen here, right?
Right.
And the opposite happened.
The opposite happened, and again, I think it's because we tried to do something which we felt was fair to the community as a whole. But if you look at the economics, so if you own 1 million square feet a building, one of the big sky rises in Los Angeles, that's worth probably $1,000 a foot, if not more. So you have $1 billion asset, cash flowing $50 or $60 million. Okay, what you would have paid is $120,000.
Oh. So
you have $1 billion, you're making $60 million, and somehow you didn't think an investment of $120,000 in the future of the community made sense?
What did you make of that vote? In terms of what you were saying before about the, your sense that the lack of concern about educating a primarily Latino student body didn't look to you too much different today than 50 years ago. How did you interpret the vote not to provide the funds?
I'm also on the board of directors of the Latino Chamber of Commerce, and it came to us, and our board was split, but we ultimately supported, or we stayed out of it. I forget which it was. But I voted to support on that board.
But so among those, even in the Latino Chamber of Commerce, in a 75% roughly Latino school, so what was the argument against that the system?
The accountability for the use of the money. That was the primary tool that was used by those that were opposed and were lobbying us to deny it the support. Our position as the Latino Chamber of Commerce was, this is about our kids. We don't have any choice. We may not like the accountability provisions that are here, but we care about the kids. And ultimately, that's what was moving the majority of our board.
Yeah, and I think it's the right thing, but it would be naive to assume that all has gone well in public education the last decade or two in Los Angeles. But progress is being made. Just this past year, we had record high graduation rates. Scores in all the state tests increased. We had a record number of English learners become proficient in English, record low suspensions, but not fast enough. So the challenge is how do we accelerate the pace of progress and as a community come together to support that, not relitigate whatever might have happened 2 years ago or 20 years ago, because we can only go forward.
I believe the audience, you can ask questions on your Slido. If you have questions, we'll bring them up. Can I ask you about one? You noted that graduation rate is up to what, almost 80%, 78% now?
North of 80%.
North of 80%. But one number really jumped out at me. Only 9% of the 9th graders in the LA public schools will ultimately complete college.
It's about 12 will graduate in 6 years. Now,
what is that? Is that, do you believe that fall off is primarily something that happens in the post-secondary, or that they are not emerging from 12th grade with the skills and knowledge to be able to ultimately succeed in college?
It's an and. So we have to better prepare students in their time with us, absolutely. And we have to better prepare them for connecting to college and staying in college, wherever college choice they make. But 12% completion, roughly the same level as those who drop out, that's not acceptable by any measure. And that's the opportunity. Now, having made progress on graduation means they're with us. That's good. So
right.
On that foundation, now we have to accelerate the pace of progress across the board.
I'm interested in your experience at the charter. Do you know what share of your students go on to college and what experience they have once they get there?
We're documenting that right now. We've got about 60% that are going on to higher education. But many of them have a real crisis in their first year. Being away from home, the worries about debt. Most of our immigrant families don't want to have any debt. They're afraid of it. And so it is a problem in that the support system, particularly for the first year of college, is not there for these students.
You know, we only have a little time, so I want to, if I could, Mr. Suarez, ask you a broader question. Because as you noted, you were part of the Chicano movement in LA in the late 60s and early 70s. If you look back now, 50 years on, in your view, has the Latino community in Southern California made more or less progress than you would have anticipated at that point?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
50 years is an interesting lens, right? It's a lifetime. And certainly, it's a different conversation today. I'm here sitting on this couch with the superintendent of schools, which I welcome and I support. And I have a constructive conversation that I know is focused on the welfare of children, and I welcome that. 50 years ago, I was in jail. So, because that's what I was advocating. So yes, I think there's progress.
Good. All right. And as a final word for you, Mr. Question, do you think students today are facing similar issues as you did as a student protester?
Yes. Yes, my first year, right, so I was valedictorian of my high school, scored high on the SAT. I went to UCLA, 30,000 students. There were 40 Mexican-American students out of 40. And I know because I counted and I found every single one of them. And then I organized them, and we created United Mexican-American Students, which became MECHA, right? So I was trained as an organizer. That is really who I am. And that first quarter that I was at UCLA from March 67 to June, I became an alcoholic. I was so alienated. I was binge drinking because I just had a culture shock going from Boyle Heights to Westwood. I might as well have been on the moon in terms of the culture shock that I experienced. And so I identify with the students that I have in our charter school because I know they're experiencing the same thing, only worse.
Yeah.
Right?
Great.
Because as a Chicano, I'm an American citizen. Most of my students, they don't know if their parents are going to be home when they get home.
Well, a sober note on which to finish. Mr. Breeden and Mr. Esparza, thank you very much for joining us. Join me in thanking them. And we're going to bring on Judy Mom in a minute. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. You guys go off that way.
Next, joining Ron on stage, welcome Judy Mom, Director of the Compton Initiative.
Hey, Ron.
How are you? So I know I'm going to have to kind of ramp you up because you're always so low energy.
I'll try.
But earlier this year, your organization was a winner of the Renewal Awards, which is a project that we run in Atlantic and with support from Allstate, sponsorship from Allstate, where we find local innovators around the country that are pursuing some of the most creative solutions and responses to the challenges facing the country. I mean, there were hundreds of organizations, Casey, thousands of organizations, and ultimately you were picked as one of the 5 winners who received $40,000 in funding. I thought that since we're here in your hometown, my hometown, that it would be an opportunity to kind of update on what you've done and what has happened. So for those unfamiliar with the Compton Initiative, tell us first about your mission and the work you do in the community. And I think we have a couple of images to help display what Judy's talking about. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you are.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. First, just thank you so much to the Atlantic Allstate team for just having the Renewal Awards. The Compton Initiative, we're a nonprofit charity organization that's been around for 13 years. We mobilize over 5,000 volunteers to do 4 volunteer days, community service days in Compton a year. On a single volunteer day, we recruit about 1,500 to 2,000 volunteers, sending them them across all over Compton, over 30 different projects, painting homes, schools, churches, murals, cleaning out backyards, graffiti removal, planting gardens, maintaining gardens, a whole lot of beautification efforts.
Yeah.
Anything in the realm of beautification, we're all about mobilizing leaders from the community, from outside the community, to love on Compton, to transform it block by block.
Yeah, you know, you've often talked, and before we go to the next, not going to the next images quite yet, you've often talked about how, obviously the physical change, the beautification is what you see, but in some ways the deeper effect are breaking down barriers between neighbors who might not have known each other. Because it is a community in transition, in racial transition, somewhat economic transition. Talk about that aspect.
Yeah, what's great about the Compton Initiative is it really brings out neighbors meeting neighbors for the first time. Neighbors from outside of Compton, it's the first time ever stepping foot into Compton, meeting neighbors from inside of Compton. And even sometimes neighbors within Compton, this is the first time ever knocking on the doors and meeting your neighbors literally a couple doors down. We've had so many neighbors who just had the challenge or just maybe unfamiliarity of speaking their neighbor's language, Spanish or whatever the language is, and they've never said any words to them. And using our volunteer day, coming out, joining together, serving together, unified under the umbrella of Just Do Good in Compton, it just breaks down so many barriers across the board.
So tell us a little about some of the projects you've done since you've received the Renewal Award, and maybe there are some images of that as well, but go ahead.
Yeah, 2019 was a huge year for us. Altogether, 2019, we completed over 150 projects, so many murals, hundreds of murals from across the board on school grounds, throughout the community. We painted over hundreds of homes. Been transformed, neighbors just loving on each other, getting to know each other. One thing that I'd love to share is the principals are really getting engaged in the community. They're hosting cleanup days on their school campuses, encouraging students to come out along with their parents to take ownership of their school.
What's the value of the murals?
The value of the murals is
maybe
so,
show one of them again.
Yeah, it brings so much life to the school grounds, and then also seeing kids participate from the school to help beautify their school, painting the mural, where they can say, yeah, I took part of that. I painted that on my school ground. It has been amazing.
Those are beautiful murals. Who is actually doing it? Are the kids doing them, or are there artists? Who does them?
The way we do it, again, we're 13 years into this. We're really fortunate we just have amazing volunteer artists, mural artists that kind of outline it and get the whole neighborhood involved, whether it be students, first time ever, picking up a paintbrush. They just outline it and let them go at it. And then our kind mural volunteer leaders, they kind of touch it up a little bit after the volunteers are done. But definitely the bulk of it's done by the volunteers.
What are some of the ways in which the funding and exposure has changed what you do, or has it changed what you do?
Absolutely brought us so much exposure and so much pride to our community. First kind of emails I got was our local city leaders just congratulating us, and putting Compton on the map nationally for something positive has been amazing. We had county leaders just emailing us, wow, that's awesome, congratulations. At the same time, so many corporate partners are also looking to us now in getting involved. So just the exposure and the open the doors of partnerships has been wonderful for us.
I think a lot of people, listening would have a variation or a kind of a split on the question, how do I get involved? And can I do something like this in my community? Yes and yes, right?
Yes and yes.
So start with the second one. There's obviously not a kit you can hand someone to do this, but there have been other communities who've come in and tried to learn.
Absolutely.
Is there an essence of what you tell them?
Yeah, we tell them first and foremost, come and check us out. We have 4 volunteer days a year. Check us out on our social. Instagram is huge, the Compton Initiative Instagram. Come follow us. Come check us out. Join. Hands-on learning. That's what we're about. We're a small nonprofit. I'm the only full-time person. Everybody else is a volunteer. And so we don't really have, like you said, like a kit. But come follow us. Any wisdom that you can glean from our organization, we're more than willing to share it. And you're right, numerous cities have come and done just that. They've brought their city leaders, brought their clergy leaders, and just volunteered with us. At the same time, they can schedule time. Hey, Judy, I'd love to schedule some time with you and some other leaders to just ask some logistical questions.
Yeah. So what's kind of the trajectory in your mind? Where is the organization going?
Right now, we're hitting about 2,000 volunteers each volunteer day. We're hoping to hit 10,000 volunteers. Compton's 10 square miles, 100,000 volunteers. Our crazy dream is to one day have 100,000 volunteers, all unified, wearing yellow Compton Initiative shirts, doing good in the community.
10 square miles, 100,000 residents?
100,000 residents.
100,000 residents, and you want 100,000 volunteers.
That's our crazy dream. Everybody to come out on this street to just love on Compton.
So, note to everyone here today, the Renewal Awards, which is this kind of nationwide search for some of the finest grassroots organizations, those nominations, submissions are now open. You can go to theatlantic.com/renewal-awards and you can nominate an organization, and you can also nominate someone, I believe, here physically at the table near the entrance. Judy, thank you so much for being with us and for everything you guys have done.
Thank you.
And we're off.
It's time for another polling question. All of our neighborhoods are changing in some way or another. How do you feel about the changes happening in your neighborhood? Positive, negative, or neutral? For a conversation on gentrification in LA, please welcome Chelsea Rendon, actress on the Starz television show Vida, here with the Atlantic's Shirley Lee.
Okay.
Hi.
This couch? Oh, this one. Okay.
It's just the two of us.
Just the two of us. Hello, everybody.
We get a couch each. So before we begin to talk about Vida and about gentrification and about Latinx representation, we have the result of the poll. And it looks like 47% of you said positive changes. Yay. Well, we're going to turn to Chelsea. So thank you for joining me here on this stage today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so first of all, for those of you who who haven't watched Vida on Starz, could you take a moment and just describe what the show is about?
The show follows two sisters that move back to Boyle Heights when their mother dies, and they have to take over the bar and the apartments that she owns. Then there's a whole aspect of finding out that she's married to a woman, and there's a whole LGBTQ aspect. And they're also fighting the gentrification that's happening because they're under attack by the villain Nelson, who's the gentrifier. And gentrification and a gentrifier is gentrification, but by another brown person. So a Latino doing it to Latinos. Mm-hmm. That's a gentrifier and gentrification, where it's gente doing it. And so it follows this whole storyline, and my character is an activist from the neighborhood that is against the sisters because I also see them as gentrifiers, even though they're only trying to survive. Yeah. And there's a lot of storylines where there's love triangles and drama and dealing with the gentrification on multiple aspects, and it's a lot, and it's sexy.
It is a lot. It's a great show. It's been renewed for a third season. I know your production is wrapping up this weekend.
Yes.
But before we go into all of that, we have a clip from the end of season 2. Spoilers, sort of. Maybe not. But it demonstrates what this show is about in terms of gentrification and gentrification. Yes. So could you set up what's going on in this scene? There's a lot of tension.
So in this clip, Mari has just found out that her group, the Vigilantes, is going to protest the sisters and the bar. But at this point, Mari's been living at the bar because she got kicked out of her house. So she's dancing with the devil, and she's in a very conflicted place because now she knows the insides of it, that they're literally just trying to make ends meet. Yes. And
So in this clip, Chelsea is Mari, and you're with one of the sisters. Let's go ahead and roll the clip.
Look, fair warning, Vigilantes plans to disrupt your music night, and every night until you meet our demands. You did just take down that mural without asking anyone.
Wait, we didn't have to ask anyone. It's our building.
Folks just want you to be held accountable. Every change you make, it has a ripple effect in the community. And this concert, it's gonna attract all these chipsters and hipsters and that sort of people.
Did you talk to them? They're your crew. Did you explain to them that you know us and that we're only doing this to stay afloat? That we're not gentrifiers?
you are, though. You're gentrifiers. It's even worse.
After everything Emma did for you.
So as you can see, she's very conflicted. And I think a lot of people are in general right now with the whole gentrification aspect and the gentrification aspect. Because we all want positive things, and like the little poll said, positivity is a good thing. But it's when you run out the other people where the problem is.
Yeah. And now, Mari, your character is clearly caught between a rock and a hard place. And here she says that gentrification, being a gentrifier is worse than being a gentrifier.
Yeah.
So tell us, I know you defined gentrification earlier, but what are the differences between the two, and what perhaps makes it more harmful?
Well, yeah, it's, again, doing it to your own people is worse. You know, you almost expect it from the white man, you know what I mean? Or like the bad guy. But when it's your primo, or like, you know, that you consider like, oh yeah, we're the same, doing it to you, it's like, damn, like it's like a below the belt shot. And so that's where Mari's like, yes, you're not, but you are. Like, even though in the show, like, they own that mural and actually their mother put it up, so they have every right to change it, but to the community, that meant something. So by them changing it affects everyone else, even though they don't know that or they don't care. And so, yeah, like I said, gentrification is Latinos doing it to each other.
So now, like your character, like Mari, you were born and raised in LA.
Yes.
So you're from Montebello?
Montebello, East LA, yes.
Right. And Mari is from Boyle Heights. So tell us about your community and how it compares to Mari's.
Well, I grew up in East LA, Boyle Heights, so I consider that my community as well. But like for me, I like to see new things coming up in Montebello. I still like am around there sometimes, but like it broke my heart where I always go to my same taco spot, Juan's Great Fiesta, that used to be called Uncle Robbie's. And I pulled up like about a year ago, and there's like the Habit and a Chipotle right next to it. And I was like, what are you doing? I was like, ew. And it's like, I am not driving 45 minutes to go get Chipotle. Like I can go 5 minutes to get, but I'm gonna drive 45 minutes for my tacos. Like that's what, you know what I mean? And like, you want that to still be there. Like I've been going to Uncle Robbie's since I was like 5 years old. Actually, I've been acting since I was 6. And the first time I ever signed an autograph was at Uncle Robbie's.
Oh, wow.
Like, so that's like a place in my heart where I'm like, that better not go anywhere because of this damn Chipotle and this damn, and no, mind you, I love Chipotle, but I don't think of Chipotle as like, oh, I'm craving Mexican food, let me go to Chipotle. It's just like, I'm craving food that's good, and I go there. And so when I was getting into character, it was connecting to that. What if they took away El Mercadito?
Yeah.
Or like El Mercado de Los Angeles, but we all know it as El Mercadito. If they took that away and put a Walmart, or if they took away Tamales Lilianas, like then I'd be like, yo, no, like I still get tamales from there for Thanksgiving. Like, my family, that's so I connected to it. And it was also a learning experience. I didn't know about the Chavez Ravine and what happened with Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
So my mom talked to me about that, and now like I still go to Dodger games, but like I feel a little like, damn, this is shady. Like, and it's like what they're doing right now with the stadium that they're building in Inglewood. Like, it's real and it's happening, and it's like great for the grand scheme of things of LA, more jobs, more stuff. Yes. But then like you're also running people out of their homes, and like acknowledging that I think is so important.
Yeah, and clearly this is something you're really passionate about. So I wonder, playing an activist on the show, how has that affected your own perspectives? I know you're talking with your mom about all of this, but when you're diving into character, how does that affect your own perspectives?
Well, for me, I think I've always in a somewhat way been an activist, and I didn't know it when it comes to brown people in Hollywood. I'm always like, Latinos in Hollywood, we gotta support, we gotta show up, and I've always been that way. I've been acting for 20 years now. That's what I know. And so with the show, that's what made me realize like, oh wait, I am an activist in my own way, not necessarily the way Mari is, but being able to see things through Mari's eyes and being able to connect that to myself, I am more vocal about things. And that's why I love being able to be here and to talk about it, because being from the neighborhood, I can see it firsthand. And it's just, it's like empowering. Mari's really empowered me.
Yeah, and you just have a very different platform. You don't go around on your bike vlogging.
I don't go,
but
no.
you're coming here. You're at the Renewal Summit.
I tweet about it sometimes or
Right.
on Instagram. Like, no, yesterday was the Latina Equal Pay Day, which shows the gap. $1 a white man makes, 54 cents a brown woman makes. And of course, you have to have somebody stupid try to go into your comments like, well, what's this and what's that? And I'm like, here's this article. Why don't you read that? Oh, but this, that. And I'm like, sit down. So like, I went on my Insta story and I was like, look, for all time, men have always made more money than women. That's facts, that's known. There's no reason to argue about it. So for me to say that brown women don't make as much isn't far-fetched. So just sit down. And like, so many women like clapped at it and I was like, yes, because it's like, just don't. Just don't.
So we'll be ready to take, oh yes, clap that, applaud that. We'll be ready to take audience questions in just a minute, so feel free to submit them. But before we do, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Latinx representation. Now, Vida made history as the first show on television to feature an all Latinx cast, as well as an all Latinx writer's room. So how does this show, with that in mind, complicate, traditional portrayals of Latinx people on television?
Well, it shows brown people as human beings instead of the stereotypes that other people write us for, because that's all they know. With brown people are nurses and they work as a janitor and they're also an actor. Like, we're everything, but the media has only shown us as the cholo, the maid, or you know what I mean, like the sexy vixen or whatever. And so being able to tell your own story is you're being able to show that. And that's the thing that the show does so well, that there's all these brown faces and they're so different. You have the activist, you have the butch lesbian, you have the like hipster like girl that's, you know what I mean, like Lynn. And then you have Carlos that's like the jock kind of dude in high school, but now he just runs the shop. And so you see all these people as just humans. And instead of being like, oh, that person's brown, it's like, oh yeah, but they're a person. And I think that's what's so important. And for the Latino community, there's little nuances that the writers added in there. Like when you have like the Tupperware, which is not really Tupperware, it's like butter or something, and you open it and there's beans. Like Latinos that see that are like, oh my God. And then anybody else seeing that may not know, but it doesn't matter because it's not for them. That little moment is for us. When the whole show is for everyone, everybody can connect to it, because the show, you could plop the show in anywhere with any skin tone, and it makes sense. You have family issues, you have love triangles, you have LGBTQ aspect. It's universal. And people need to not see, oh, it's a brown show. It's not. It's a show that features brown people, but everyone can relate to it.
It's about this. It's about the specificity being universal in a lot of ways. So we've got an audience question. What have been the challenges in getting visibility for this show and for our community?
Well, I think it's kind of just what I said. People think like, oh, it's a brown show, so it belongs in this box. And everybody sees Latinos in a small box, and we're so much more than that. And then it's also something that we do to ourselves. Oh, you're a Puerto Rican playing a Mexican, so therefore that's not okay. And so right now it's just about, one, we hold a lot when it comes to audience numbers. Like I think it's like 24 or 25% Latino audiences hold. And yet we also don't show up to our own projects. Like showing up for Miss Bala or like El Chicano, like not a lot of Latinos showed up, but they want to show up for the Marvel movie. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like we have to show up for ourselves, and therefore Hollywood can see that we are worthy and that we are worth money and to invest in us. But it's hard, and that's where it's like it comes to the people. Everyone else, even if you're not brown, if you show up to a movie opening weekend, if you tweet about something, if you like something and you talk about it, word of mouth, like that's what's so important, and that's where it's important to have allies, because we can't do it alone. You know what I mean? Like everybody showed up for Black Panther. It didn't matter if you were black or brown or whatever it was, everyone showed up. Crazy Rich Asians, everyone showed up. So it's like we need to show up and not segregate ourselves. We need to just unite. Especially, I always say, everyone that's not white, if we come together, we will move mountains. But like, we're all like, oh no, but you're this, and oh, but I'm that. And it's like, no, we're all the other. Let's just come together and like do stuff.
Turns into the Sisyphean task. Now we have another question. How can shows like Vida help address issues like gentrification and gentrification IRL, in real life?
Real life. Well, I think by us just talking about it, by us existing, now you know what gentrification is. Maybe you didn't know what it is before. So it just starts a dialogue. And I think that's just the most important thing, just starting a dialogue. Because if, like, again, I didn't know about the Chavez Ravine, and I grew up in LA, and I go to Dodger State, you know what I mean? Like, and so I think it's, again, just important to have a dialogue and to talk about it, and to just be open to having the conversation. And if you don't agree, like the dude on commenting on my post, like, he doesn't agree, but it's like, okay, but if you don't agree, that's fine. But then don't attack if I'm giving you facts.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, don't be naive to be like, well, you're wrong, where it's like, okay, wait, maybe you're right, but I don't agree with it, and that's fine. We're not all gonna agree.
Yeah, don't just talk at you. Let's have a dialogue. Another question. What do you believe Latinx individuals can do to add to community development and growth without being gentrifiers? That's a good question.
I think, again, it all comes back to dialogue. Like, if you go to the city council meeting and you talk about, okay, look, there's all these potholes, can we fix that? Okay, we need money for that. Then let's have a yard sale, or let's have a community like food potluck where you sell food or something. You know what I mean? So that it's like you're a part of it, and then it's not being gentrification where some man at the top is making all these decisions if you're trying to be a part of it. But then again, you go Mari route, and then she's spray painting and she's causing all this fuss. And yes, sometimes that works too, but it's almost sometimes where like you have to join the club in order to like make a difference. Where, what's that phrase where you have to infiltrate? There's a thing, but it's like being at the table makes more of a change, I think, than beating at the door.
Now, speaking of that, I'd like to wrap up with asking, I know that you are producing your own content. You eventually want to direct.
Yes.
Is that right? So with that in mind, you know, what would you say remains to be done as far as Latinx representation on screen goes? Just bringing it back to Hollywood.
Again, it's about people in power making decisions. So I'm producing a film that I'm going to star in, which has me as the lead, and opposite me is going to be a black man. So you have a black man and a brown woman as the leads of this film. That in itself is, oh, wow, you know what I mean? And so it's supporting that. And then I've already talked to the producer, who's a black man, and I was like, I want to make sure that we have our people behind the scenes on set, not just us on screen, because that's great, but like the writers are the ones that write us. And so we need opportunities for writers, and we need opportunities for producers that are brown, that are black, that are, you know what I mean? Anything other, because there's been some great scripts, and I remember someone from Sony telling me that there was a great script and they passed it up, and then the white man at top was like, oh, but that doesn't make sense. Nobody goes running in the street after an elote man. And it's like, yo, we do that almost every day. But because you don't know and you don't see it, you don't think it's real. But it's like, we need powerful people in those positions. The reason why Vida was made is because of Marta Fernandez, who was an executive at Starz, who's no longer there. But there was her. She's the reason why this happened, why this show is existing. And it's because there was a Latina in a power position that made shit happen. So we need to just support each other to get in powerful positions, and support each other when we're in those powerful positions.
Absolutely. Now, Vida is filming its 3rd season. Its first 2 seasons can be found on Starz, on the Starz streaming app. You can watch the first couple of episodes for free on YouTube.
Yes. But also watch it on the app. That's the conversation that we had, that I have with a lot of people. It's not just about watching, but watching the right way so that the numbers count. So that's what I mentioned, opening weekend, go to the box office. When you watch Vida, don't break the Fire Stick and watch it for free. Pay the $5.99 or $7.99 for the month and watch it. Because even though for us it's like, oh yeah, I don't want to spend that money, the Hollywood sees it. And if you don't spend that money, then they're not getting that money, and then therefore we're not worthy. And oh, we're only bringing in 100,000. We're not bringing in 5 million. So therefore, oh, we'll give them this amount, or we'll do this. So it's like, that's really important. We have to put our money where our mouth is, and we have to show up at the box office. We have to show up on, you know, whenever it's so important.
To support Latinx art, wherever it is. Well, thank you so much for being on stage with me.
Thank you.
And thank you all again.
Okay, we just get up? Okay, bye. Thank you.
Now for a conversation on criminal justice reform, please welcome Patrice Calors, co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Global Network. To lead the conversation, Atlantic staff writer Todd Purdom.
Welcome. It's delightful to be here. Thank you. So, Patrice, 6 years ago, you were present at the creation of what's now become a nationwide and even a global movement. Could you just tell us a little bit about how Black Lives Matter was born?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. Welcome to LA if you're not from LA. If you're from LA, LA all day. Yes, 6.5 years ago, Alicia Garza, Opal Tometi, and I started Black Lives Matter. And we started it as a response to what we saw was a crisis around vigilante violence and police violence. And one of the first victims of vigilante violence, sort of in our generation, being Trayvon Martin, that became public. And one of the first, racially charged trials. I think every generation has a racially charged trial. Ours was the trial of George Zimmerman. And what we recognized when that trial was happening is that, in fact, Trayvon Martin was being the one that was really being named as not a victim, but rather a person who, and George Zimmerman and the defense side said that Trayvon Martin was trying to harm George Zimmerman. And so
with Skittles and iced tea.
Exactly. So we spent an entire year, I think, as a generation, really thinking that George Zimmerman was going to go to jail. There was going to be some sort of retribution, but in fact, he didn't, and he was acquitted. And so many of us were waiting for that verdict. And on July 13th, when George Zimmerman was acquitted of Trayvon Martin's murder, we stood up and we said enough was enough. And we started a phrase called Black Lives Matter, turned into a hashtag that then turned into sort of an online force, and very quickly understood it to be something that wasn't just about protests, but organizing a new generation of leaders to take on vigilante violence and police violence.
You're a very non-hierarchical, non-patriarchal organization. It's very grassroots. Why do you think it caught on so quickly, sparking a national conversation? And would it have been possible without social media?
It would not have been possible without social media.
So something to be grateful for about social media.
Yeah. I mean, I like social media for the most part. I think social media is not to blame. Human beings are to blame. And so for us, social media was the megaphone for Black Lives Matter. And I remember on July 15th, I kind of wrote to the public saying, hey, everybody, Alicia Garza and I started this thing called Black Lives Matter. We hope it gets bigger than we can ever imagine.
In this period of its growth, has it changed? Have the goals changed from those initial goals of shining a light on this kind of injustice, or is it still pretty much the same mission?
I think part of what we've recognized in the last 6.5 years is grassroots organizing is critical to making change, and that we need to have a multi-pronged strategy. So you've seen many of the Black Lives Matter movement leaders sort of lean into electoral politics. You've seen some folks run for office. You've seen a lot of folks talk about land ownership and property ownership. And so I think the beauty of Black Lives Matter and its movement, it was always a movement that it was about an evolution and never about a stagnant process. And you've seen it time and time again. One of the big things once 45 was elected was everybody asking, where's Black Lives Matter? And many of us said, well, we're still here. Here in Los Angeles, Black Lives Matter Los Angeles has spent the last 2 years showing up to the Hall of Justice where DA Jackie Lacey is at, challenging her and ensuring, I need more claps than that, guys.
But she's going to face a robust primary now, right? I mean, there's going to be
she's outside of the presidential election, this is going to be the biggest election in the country.
We'll talk a little bit about LA, because you grew up in LA in circumstances, by the way, that I think we should say probably very few people in this room could imagine. And I highly commend Patrice's incredible memoir, When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir. But how particularly are the actions of Black Lives Matter manifesting themselves in today's LA, and what are the goals that you were really setting for yourself, and in your Reform LA Jails organization as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think part of what we've done in the last 2 years in particular in Los Angeles is really look at the impact of the criminal justice system on our communities and our loved ones. And we've spent 30 years as a nation creating a criminal justice system that is invested in decimating and completely ravaging communities. And so the last 2 years have looked like many groups, Justice LA, Black Lives Matter, Reform LA Jails, pushing to end the building of two $3.5 billion jails, which this year we won.
In August, right?
In August, yes. We stopped the building of a women's jail and we stopped the building of a mental health jail. And for us, you know, the stopping of something is just one part of the fight. It's the building that we are much more interested in. And so what does it look like to build an LA that is really grounded in dignity and care for the people who most need it, people with severe mental illness, people who are cycling in and out of homelessness, folks who are poor in Los Angeles. And as we know, the gap continues to grow here in LA. I was just telling you backstage, I grew up in Van Nuys, and we remember, you know, the one homeless person, his name was Eugene. We talked to him all the time, but you go back to Van Nuys, and there's an entire homeless encampment now. And so this is not an accident, it's purposeful. And so much of the work that we're trying to do is upend the sort of dangerous nature of the system and also create a new system.
I mean, at the time of the 1994 crime bill, which has become a big subject of debate in the Democratic primary field this year, one of the criticisms of it from the right was that it had too many programs like midnight basketball and so forth and so on, and it was kind of soft-hearted. What are the programmatic things that can be done now to be really more responsive to the community's needs rather than just have this mass incarceration and criminalization of ordinary everyday behavior with gang injunctions and stop and frisk in New York? What are the programmatic things at the ground level that are needed in LA particularly?
Well, number one, we need a DA that's actually going to do the things that the community wants. We need a DA that's willing to not mass incarcerate communities. We need a DA that's willing to challenge the incarceration of people with severe mental illness. We need a DA that will champion a new way in Los Angeles. So that is critical, and most people don't understand the role of the DA, one of the most powerful elected officials in our nation. Number two, we have a ballot measure that will be passed March 3rd if the LA voters show up to the ballot box and make sure it's passed, Reform LA Jails, that will move the largest dollar amount out of incarceration and into mental health. And so that is incredibly important for us. And then lastly, this is not programmatic, but it really is a call to the audience, which is we've been obsessed with incarceration and punishment as a nation. And we have to not just change policy, but we have to change how we culturally understand accountability. And accountability cannot look like a badge and a gun. It cannot look like a cage. And we need to undo the ways in which we've imagined public safety.
Well, you have pretty firsthand experience with this because both the man you came to know as your birth father and your brother at various times in your growing up years were incarcerated. Your father struggled with substance abuse. Your brother has schizoaffective disorder and has had, you know, pretty severe mental health problems. How did that affect you? And I assume it's very much informed your passion for these issues today.
Absolutely. The single most painful thing growing up inside of Los Angeles was not that my father was a drug user or that my brother was schizophrenic. It was the ways in which they were responded to by the police and the system. It was that they did not get the treatment that they needed. There was no early intervention.
Slam against the wall.
Exactly. The only type of intervention was police intervention, which is harmful, dangerous, and ultimately led to my father's death. And so this conversation about criminal justice reform is not just a conversation about policy, it's about real human lives.
I was telling you backstage that more than 30 years ago when I was working as a reporter at the New York Times in New York, covering the New York City Police Department, I had an editor ask me if I wouldn't do a story about whether cops are dumb. And I said, not if you want me to keep covering the cops. But it was my experience that a lot of cops are afraid of the communities they're meant to serve, not familiar with the communities that depend on them, particularly not familiar in many cases with communities of color. What is the answer? Is there any hope that the mission of police and the communities they serve can be synced up better to not have the kinds of interventions that your brother and father experienced, but interventions that are more holistic in nature, in which cops can get the other services for people who need them, and it's not just putting somebody behind bars?
Well, I think that's a great question. My answer is not going to answer your question. It's going to really state another question, which is, why are cops being used as social workers in the first place?
Or jails as mental health facilities.
Exactly. And so we have literally created an entire infrastructure where the only answer we have is policing, instead of an infrastructure where we are looking at, well, what are the needs of community members and what other jobs can be sourced? And so most of what we've done as a community at Los Angeles City and County is poured, half of our city and county budgets into law enforcement. And then you start to look at other budgets, the budgets for housing, the budgets for green parks, and not only are they the smallest budgets, they're continually cut. And so the conversation for us is, what are we investing in? And what do we need to divest from? And so the argument is that divestment really should be out of law enforcement and a deep investment into community-based services.
In just a few minutes, we're going to take some questions, so be thinking of anything you might want to ask. You went to middle school in a gifted program in Sherman Oaks, outside your home neighborhood, and obviously this exposed you to a world that was quite different from the one you grew up in. And in your book, you talk very movingly about having dinner with one of your friends at her family's house and learning that her father, whom you thought was this jolly Santa Claus-like man asking you about your feelings in your life, was actually your landlord, who'd let your apartment be without a refrigerator for a year and let the conditions. What was that like?
As a child, it was, I think I wrote about that moment in the book because it really was one of those moments where you, as a child, you don't realize the impact, and as an adult, you sort of look back and understand the experience more. And there's this conversation, I think, about like, what is a racist? What does racism look like? That is very.
Isn't there a film, I'm Not a Racist, Am I? Right?
Exactly. It's very about the interpersonal dynamics, and we forget that racism is actually systemic. And so being with my landlord, who was also my friend's father, he was actually a really kind human being. But what he was practicing was awful and terrible for my family and community. And so this conversation, I think, as an adult, it's much more nuanced. We have to change systems. We can change attitudes all day, but at the end of the day, if we're not changing the systems, then human beings' lives are at risk.
Well, that's obviously part of why you're here today doing the work you're doing, right? I mean, the gap between those two realities. What was your very first foray into activism that when you knew you had a gift for this and you could make a difference?
I was 17 years old, and I had planned a protest against a homophobic at a park. I was actually kissing my girlfriend. He interrupted us kissing and called us terrible homophobic slurs. And so I got all my queer friends together, and we wrote on posters. There were 7 of us. And, and we protested down Ventura Boulevard. There was no Target then. I didn't know that. I didn't know about Targets. What I knew is that I was angry and I was upset, and I needed like the world to know, even if it was only 7 people and it was going to be on Ventura Boulevard in Sherman Oaks. It felt incredibly important to me, and that was like the spark that kind of showed me a whole new world around activism.
An audience member wants to know, and I don't know whether you can answer this because of some 501c3 regulations, but who do you support for the LADA, and how can they get involved and support that campaign?
Oh, that's lovely. And you're anonymous. That's not fair. I'm not going to actually say who I support because you're right. I can't really do that. But I will say that anybody but Jackie Lacey. And what I will say is that everybody in this audience should look at all of the DA candidates, see what you are most aligned with, and join that campaign to make sure that that person is on board.
You're not just an organizer, but you're an artist, and you recently got your MFA from USC. Art is really great at making people uncomfortable, right? So what is the most important role for art in making change?
Well, as many artists, especially artists inside of Black movement spaces, we really do see ourselves as part of a long legacy of the Black arts movement. We stand on the shoulders of people like Amir Baraka, And so for us and Paul Robeson, you know, my work is just an extension of the activism that I do. I don't really see the difference between art and organizing. I think organizing makes people incredibly uncomfortable as well. I remember, you know, one of my first massive protests taking on Metro, most of which are the County Board of Supervisors, almost 19 years ago, and like yelling at them, and I was like, oh, I was uncomfortable yelling at them. I know they're uncomfortable, and art does the same thing where it, you know, pushes us to feel and think about things in different ways. And I say art is even more effective because it softens you to be like, oh, I did not understand this, and I understand this more now.
So it opens you. Our colleague Adam Server in The Atlantic has a great piece in the current print issue about the dangers of overrating the importance of civility. So when you talk about being uncomfortable yelling at people, being uncomfortable being in people's face, how do you balance that in terms of actually having an effect? Because if you're just yelling at people, they won't listen.
Well, I think you start yelling at people, and then, you know, not
when
just
you've got
people
them,
on the street. Yeah, and then when you got them, you're like, all right, let's sit down and talk. Like, the other thing is that I think people don't realize that Black Lives Matter, it's not like we wanted to shut down freeways, guys. That was not like the thing we showed up and we're like, the first thing we're gonna do is shut down a freeway. It was, oh, you're not listening to us. You're not paying attention to the deaths as a crisis because it doesn't impact you. So we have to elevate our tactics. Shutting down a freeway is one tactic to get you to sit at the table to try to change your mind. And if you're not going to change how you are in power, then we're going to make sure we unseat you.
Well, in your book, you write very movingly about an action you took on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. Just briefly describe that.
It was the first Black Lives Matter action in Los Angeles in 2013, and we all collectively decided that we were not going to go to Crenshaw to protest, because why? Everybody on Crenshaw knows what we're protesting. So we decided to go to Beverly Hills. And we took the streets of Rodeo Drive and took those, you know, those like iconic steps, and spent time as the helicopters hovered over us. We, you know, called on the patrons that were eating their lunch at the time and told them to put down their champagne glasses and their forks and take a moment for Trayvon Martin, because what they were witnessing, the incessant helicopter, that's what we experienced on an everyday basis in our own communities. And they were only going to experience it for about an hour, and then those helicopters were going to leave and return to South Central and East LA and Van Nuys and Pacoima. And so take a moment to honor the people who have passed and who've been stolen from us. And I think that was, you know, one of the major launches of our movement.
And what did they do?
They put down the champagne glasses.
It seems an appropriate note to end on, but thank you so much, Patrice, for being here today. It's really important to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Really good.
The power of art and activism, stories of pain and real human lives, stories of renewal, stories of hope. What an ender that was. Well, not quite our ender. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Patrice. We've covered such rich territory this morning. I hope you all leave here having learned something new, inspired by ideas that you heard or people that you met. Before we wrap for lunch, we have a special musical performance to close out the morning. I'm the warm-up act as they set us up. Earlier this morning, we heard from the executive director of the Urban Voices Project, a choir that showcases the stories and voices of those who've experienced homelessness. Before they take the stage, I wanted to thank all our speakers and moderators, and I want to give another big, big shout out to Allstate for making our renewal series possible. Thank you so much for your generous support of our journalism, and today, I want to thank you all for coming to join us this morning. Your time is so valuable, so we're enormously grateful that you spend so much of it with us. There's no need to rush out the door, but after the performance ends, we'd love you to stay for lunch. We're going to serve you really, really yummy and delicious and healthy food. You'll have a chance to continue the conversation and connect with old friends and new. And now, to take us out, please welcome the Urban Voices Project Choir, led by co-founder and artistic director Liav Sofer.
doing today? We are the Urban Voices Project, and we just invited you to walk with us. And what that means is we're going to ask you to learn these words. Are you ready? That didn't sound like it. Are you ready? I walk in the Spirit. Try it.
I walk in the Spirit.
I walk in the light.
I walk in the light.
I walk through the darkest hours of night.
Hours of night.
And I call my ancestors. Wait. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to call your ancestors, you got to mean it, okay? Let's try that again. And I call my ancestors.
And I call my ancestors.
To my left and my right.
To my left and my right.
To walk with me.
To walk with me.
Hit it. To walk with me.
To walk with me.
2, 3, ready, go. I walk in the Spirit. I walk in the light.
I walk in the light.
I walk through the darkest hours of night. And I call to my left and my right. To walk. Let's try that again. Let me hear you put your hands together. Come on. Hey, I walk in the Spirit. I walk in the
Good afternoon. The next song reminds me of a man who has been down 6 times, and he falls down the 7th time. And in that 7th time, he has enough will and strength to rise again. So listen to the words and see if you can't find a time that you have risen again in your own life.
Hello, everyone. Are you guys enjoying yourselves? Hey, I'm the Prime Minister of the Urban Voice Project, and we want you guys to enjoy yourself. And just like The seventh time the man got back up, I myself found myself in a homeless situation, and through singing, I was able to rise again. So join us in when we sing, and have a good time.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marilyn. I'm with the Urban Voices Project. And in 2009, I was injured. And then I had health issues. I became homeless. And I was introduced to the Urban Voices Project in Skid Row. I've been singing for a long time. And sometimes when my health issues become grave, I don't have the strength to get up and even go to my doctor's appointments. But because of my commitment to the Urban Voices Project and what they stand for, what we stand for, I will get up and I will do whatever it takes. I encourage you all to rise with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was an invitation to rise. So that's right, I'm gonna ask you the two most feared words in all of live performance. It's called audience participation. Join us and let's rise. And do me a favor, put your hands on your heart and say for me, I've got the patience. Say it out loud, I've got the patience. With your hands in the air to inhale, exhale. Say it. I've got the energy to sing. I've got the strength to keep on going so I can rise again, so I can rise again. Now let's see if we can get this whole room to do the touch step, okay? We're gonna go to your right, here we go. And touch, step. Oh, very good, not bad. Some of you guys need work. Hey, all right. So I'll feed you the words. The first one is, I got the patience to inhale, exhale, and show it to me with those beautiful symbols and gestures. This choir is gonna help you out. Are you ready? All right, let's do it together. Here it comes. 1, 2, 3. I've got the patience. Hands on your heart to inhale. To inhale. I've got the energy. To sing. I've got the strength. To keep on going. That's right. So I can rise again. Rise again. Let's try it again. I've got the patience. I've got the patience. To inhale, exhale. I've got the energy to sing. I've got the strength to keep on going so I can rise again. Rise again. One more time, just the voices. Come on. I've got the patience to inhale, exhale. I've got the energy to sing. I've got the strength to keep on going so I can rise again. Rise again. Thank you so much for the Urban Voices Project. Find us online, Facebook and Instagram. Here in Skid Row, bringing music is the bridge. Thank you so much to the Atlantic for having us. We hope you have a fantastic rest of your days. Let's head out of here, choir. You guys ready? Let's walk to, and I walk in the spirit.